Yes. Should we start? Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and colleagues. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this panel discussion dedicated to one of the most important topics in a global economic development today, special economic zones. Governance, performance, and what actually works. I'm confident that today's discussion will provide a valuable opportunity to exchange practical insights, share international experience, and explore what truly makes special economic zones successful in delivering sustainable economic impact. To open our session, it's my distinct honor to invite the Deputy Minister of Investment, Industry and Trade of Republic of Uzbekistan, Mr. Ilshad Qasimov. Mr. Qasimov, the floor is yours.
Добрый день, уважаемые.
Good afternoon, dear participants of the panel session. We are very pleased to welcome you in Uzbekistan, and I hope that today's event will be of a great use for all of us, and I hope that you will participate not only at the panel sessions, but you will have the opportunity to see the historic sites, and of course you must try the local plov. Now I will move to the main speech. You know, in the recent years, economic relations between Uzbekistan and the global community is developing and strengthening. Over the last 5 years, the mutual trade has had a stable increase. Almost 5,000 enterprises we have today with the foreign capital. Today in our country, we have successfully working the number of foreign companies, such as companies that work in energy, geology, construction, healthcare, textile industry, and food industry. For the business activity in Uzbekistan today, the flourishable conditions are created. The priority in this direction is the development of the free economic zones, at which, while implementing the investment projects, the special tax and customs incentives are applied. Currently in the country, we have 47 free economic zones in action that are located in almost all the provinces of our country, which contributes to the improved and accelerated industrial development, logistics development, and the export potential of the country in the region. The development of free economic zones allows Uzbekistan to strengthen its positions as one of the most attractive investment centers of the Central Asian region. On these territories, all the conditions are created for the implementation of investment projects at both greenfield and brownfield conditions. At the same time, for the free economic zones, all necessary networks and infrastructure are communicated. The activity of all free economic zones of the country is first of all aimed at the development of export potential, improvement of the trade of goods with the high added value, and job creation, as well as creation and establishment of the new modern production infrastructure. Couple of words about the free economic zones. Bukhara Free Industrial Development Complex is the modern complex which has 1,000 hectares area, and it is aimed at implementation of the large investment projects. The complex has the production site and other sites that have all needed in engineering infrastructure. On the territory of the complex, Unitel company, Silk Road Innovation Group, Evolution Motors are installed. The overall amount of investment is above 500 million USD. This project is aiming at establishing 800 new jobs and establishment of high technology sites. Then Navai Industrial Development Complex, 50 hectares is the area, and it is for the new investment projects. This is the industrial site that was established not long ago, and today the residents of the complex are such companies as Union Group Navai and Aerosol East, with the total amount of investment of 55 million USD. Over 200 jobs will be created in this complex. It's offered for the broad package of the incentives and preferences is offered to the investors. While implementing the investment projects, investors receive the free access to the land plots and very significant tax and customs incentives. There is the incentive for property tax, customs tax, and water tax. Depending on the investment size, there is a period of 3 to 10 years of incentives. There is a table available. You can see it in the open access. Such measures create attractive environment for the attraction of investments to the development of the production in Uzbekistan. In addition to this, on the territories of these zones, investors are offered to have competitive conditions for the implementation of industrial projects. And one of the advantages is the developed engineering infrastructure that is has a communication until the border of the zone. The customs fee is the zero, at the level of zero. Also, there is the materials and raw materials not produced in the country needed for the production needs of the site are freed from the customs fees. Also, the raw material receives the VAT freeing up to 120 days, and if it's needed, it can be prolonged. So there is the zero customs fee for the products that are produced in Uzbekistan. Also, there is the customs fee release for the materials, raw materials, and for the products that are produced for export. These incentives allow to significantly decrease the production expenditure and improve the potential and the capacity of the companies. Also, on the territory of the free economic zones, we have the active development of various sectors, industrial sectors, which contributes to the high level of attractiveness of the region. One of the largest sectors is the construction materials production. You know that our country is developing in the accelerated mode. That's why the production of construction materials is our strategic direction for today, where we have the implementation of over 160 projects with a total investment amount of 1.5 billion USD. The significant amount is taken by machine construction, over 40 projects with the total amount of over 1 billion USD. In the textile sector, over 90 projects with 300 million USD investment, and food production represented by 70 projects with 500 million USD overall amount. Also, in the free economic zones, we have the active development of chemical, electrotechnical, pharmaceuticals, furniture production, and logistics services. Such Diversification of the sectors provides for the sustainable growth, job creation, and improvement of industrial cooperation. As of today, in the free economic zones of the country, a big amount of investment projects with the participation of direct investments is increasing. If we look into the structure of investments, today the largest amount of investments is in China. 200 projects, around 4 billion USD. In this regard, China is the leading country, and we believe that they will increase their presence in the free economic zones of Uzbekistan. In addition to this, we have established with the participation of, only with participation of Chinese investors, 8 economic zones where we have only Chinese capital present. Among other active investments, so we can highlight the Russian Federation, over 30 projects with a total amount of 300 million USD, Turkey, 30 projects with 157 million USD. The geography of direct foreign investments is really broad, really vast. Investments coming from UAE, Iran, Great Britain, Saudi Arabia, Kazakhstan, India, and South Korea. The total amount of projects in the free economic zones is over 1,300 projects, almost 1,400, which is the sign of the high level of attractiveness. This contributes to the development of international cooperation and improvement of the potential and capacity of free economic zones. Briefly, I would like to talk about the process on how to receive the status of participant of the free economic zone. At the first stage, investor submits business plan, investment application for the review of the project. The processing period is not more than 10 days, which contributes to the operative decision making. The second stage is the participation of the investor in the auction for acquisition of the land plot. Usually this process takes up to 15 days. I think that is too long, but we work on decreasing this period several times. We wanted to take 2 days. After this, the registration of the company in the free economic zone as resident is taking place, and signing of the land agreement, land rent agreement, which takes 3 days. At the final stage, the company officially starts its activity in the free economic zone and goes through registration of taxes in banking system and so on. The whole process of application and document review is done through the single window platform, which provides for transparency and convenience for the investors. Today, from the ministry, we are completing the work on provision of single platform for the free economic zones of the country, which will include all the procedures on selection, registration, and the further reporting throughout the electronic platform, which contributes to the establishing of additional stimulus for going through the bureaucracy barriers. So here you can see the number of companies which are well known globally that are present in the free economic zones, which contributes to the cooperation with international brands. Among the partners, we have such well known companies as Hyundai, Kia, BYD, Chery, Haval, and we also work with other projects, and I believe that in the upcoming period this list of companies will become longer. Also in the country we have large companies working in chemical industry, food production, trade, including Coca-Cola, Persil, Waikiki, and so on. The presence of such well-known brands highlights that we have the very attractive investment environment and convenience for the investors. Such projects present in our country contribute to the jobs creation and introduction of modern technologies. These success stories are the important factor for the improvement of business environment in the country and capacity building. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your insightful remarks and for providing a strategic perspective on the development of special economic zones in Uzbekistan. I believe you have set the perfect context for our discussion, Mr. Kasimov. So, Mr. Rami, let me start with you. Mr. Rami Rafiq, Managing Director and Senior Partners, Boston Consulting Group. So my question is, why do some special economic zones succeed while others fail to create lasting economic impact?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great to see the great success in Uzbekistan, because actually there are more zones that fail than zones that succeed. There was a very nice report by UNICTAD, a UN agency, in 2019. It's a bit old, but it's a good report. It's part of the World Investment Report, and there was a deep dive on special economic zones. They identified around 5,400 zones globally in more than 140 countries. And in these, they saw that 47% of the zones are underutilized. And then 25% of them are almost empty. And only 13% are utilized at full capacity. And that is not only focused on one region or another. In India, for example, 1/3 of the approved zones never become operational, and India has between 400 and 450 zones. That's the same case in Africa. More than 40% of the zones in Africa have less than 25% utilization rate. So that's a global issue, and setting up a zone will never mean that it will automatically be successful. So the question is no longer on how to launch zones, but how to create the economic impact and to do it in a lasting way. Few failure patterns that we have seen in special economic zones. The first one is that it's an incentive-led proposition. So focusing on tax holidays, not really on the competitive advantage or the value proposition of the zone. Number two is a weak de facto delivery. I mean, planning a zone is probably 10-20% of the effort. Consistently executing and delivering on it is the 80 or 90% of the effort should be there. And still a lot of zones face delays in attracting the investor. The third one is a passive zone management. So instead of proactively going and attracting the investor, we would wait for the investor to come, and we would passively help in debottlenecking. The fourth one is there are no linkages with the domestic economy. That's a double-edged sword, because too much linkage might lead to leakage, but still it's very important to create those linkages with the base economy to ensure synergies and multiplier effects. And the last failure pattern is unclear governance. There are a lot of authorities, developers, operators that might have overlapping mandates, or even worse, gaps in the mandates. So these are the 5 main reasons for why SEZs fail. You ask about why they fail. The flip side of it is the successful ones, and I can name a few of the successful ones. I prefer not to name the failed one, but the successful ones, for example, if we look at Morocco and how they managed to unlock the automotive cluster in Tangier Med, how they brought in, how they created an ecosystem or a clustering effect around automotive, bringing a anchor investor, Renault back then. I think the deal was negotiated between the Prime Minister of Morocco and the CEO of Renault, bringing the OEM, bringing the suppliers around the OEM, having the Sovereign Wealth Fund co-invest in the factory, linking the factory to the railroad network, having access, Tanger Med, a huge port, having access to commercial maritime lanes, having foreign trade agreements with the US, with Europe, with the Arab world, and so on. These are few success factors, but creating that ecosystem, which by the way also included academies and technical institutions to graduate the engineers and the technicians. So that is one example of success. Singapore has really important rule of law in their special economic zone. That's extremely important for investors to have predictable, transparent, and stable regulations with a strong rule of law. As I mentioned previously, the interlinkage with the base economy, South Korea managed to do that extremely well. And even if we look at more emerging countries that are landlocked, like Rwanda, they've managed to establish an effective governance. Now it's a different scale than the other countries, but still perceived relatively successful in how they governed the zones. So to really summarize, I think we need to move from the old model of tax-driven zones to more ecosystem-driven zones. So less focused on tax holiday, especially with the new global tax coming in, less focus on custom exemptions, cheap land, generic infrastructure and so on, or at least have it if needed, but do much more than this. So we're talking about attracting the anchor investor, about having the supplier base, about attracting the skills and the talent pipeline, about having integration with the domestic industry, active investment promotion and attracting that, and not only attracting but also focusing on the aftercare, because the aftercare has a lower effort and bigger impact, because that helps in the expansion. So the next generation of SEZs for us should be less about what to exempt and more about how to enable.
Thank you. So also I have one more question. What are the most important governance elements needed to make the transition successful?
Yeah, there are several ways to govern a special economic zone. The most common is the public model, where the government creates a public sector developer. There is also a free zone authority that oversees that developer. That's one model. There's another model which is private model, where the government selects a private sector developer, and then the authority oversees also that private sector developer. And then in between you have many hybrid models. Public special economic zones are usually more necessary when the private investment appetite is limited, when the country does not have a large track or long track history in developing special economic zones. Obviously, a private special economic zone or privately led special economic zone is much better, because it limits the drains on the government funding and brings in the know-how. Usually countries, as I mentioned, with more advanced special economic zones have more of a hybrid or private sector-led governance. But more importantly, I think the key success in governance is playing for the developer and more importantly the authority to play that orchestrator role that we were talking about, in order to enable the cluster effect, the ecosystem. So bringing all players or all stakeholders into the zone or close to the zone, and that it's not only the customs and the tax authority and the immigration and the utilities, but it's also about having a quality of life for people who live there. It's about bringing in the universities, the R&Ds, the technical centers, the anchor investors, and so on and so forth. And if we focus on the authority, I think the key success factors is to have an autonomous zone authority. It's to have a clear split between the policy and operations. Don't mix both together. So separate the developer from the operator, and really have delegated authority from the ministries or the authorities to the zone regulator. That's an important. The delegation of authority is extremely important.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rami Rafiq. It's Managing Director and Senior Partner, Boston Consulting Group, that gives us a useful perspective on how successful special economic zone ecosystems are built. Yeah? So let me now turn to the role of infrastructure and regional connectivity. Mr. Enrique Pinalli, Regional Head, Central and Western Private Sector from Asian Development Bank. Mr. Enrique Pinalli, my question is, how does Asian Development Bank support special economic zones in becoming drivers of regional connectivity rather than isolated economic zones?
Yeah, well, I guess it's good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being in this session, and I would like to thank again the organizers for including me in these very relevant topics. I must confess, this is my fifth investment forum, so I attended from the very first one, and I can tell you that the very first one was not as big as this one, and I'm really impressed by the level of interest that investors have in this yearly event. Now, Rami, you just reminded me that I also, when I was younger, 20 years younger, I also actually wrote a piece at the OECD on the best practices on special economic zone, and pretty much the finding was the same. Investing in incentives and land were pretty much the only drivers of most of the economic zone, and I think it's still relevant to today the way we look at them, because there is an implicit understanding or expectation that you give the incentives and the land that the investor comes. But I think when we start looking now at these more integrated economies that we work on, this is not enough. Special economic zones are competing, and the way you compete is to establishing differentiator. Infrastructure and connectivity are differentiator, and what is used to be just the attraction or using, let's say, the special economic zone as a policy to attract investors in less developed area is no longer, it wasn't super successful before, and it is no longer a policy that will work in most cases. Why? Because you need connectivity. You need to have the special economic zone connected both to the domestic market in terms of the suppliers, in terms of the SME, in terms of providing that linkage to the local economy that is needed to be able for them to flourish, and the connection outward. Most of the time you think of this zone as export-oriented, meaning that you want them to pretty much help you export what you have, you can produce in the country. But now, with the connectivity and the integration of the economies, as you know, ADB has a flagship program that works for many years called CAEx, where pretty much we're looking at those economic corridors. And the economic corridors, especially in this region, are very strong and growing. So what I'm trying to imply here is, if you have now a manufacturer in one of the economic zone, is most likely not going to just source everything domestically, but you're probably going to rely on, let's say, input from Kazakhstan, and it's going to rely to freight forwarders that are working on middle corridors. So really you have to start thinking is, how is my economic zone going to be integrated in this web? And that's really this next generation of free economic zone that we are now embarking on trying to modernize to a partnership with the Ministry of Investment on see how do we bring it to the next level, how do we attract investors in a platform rather than just an enclave, as Rami said before. So this is really the challenge going forward. But I also want to give you a couple of other market trends that I think are very relevant. As you know, we're all trying now to go into, to make your free trade zone even more attractive at the regional level. You have to start thinking, what are the investors looking for? And one of the things is really the greening of the zones. The whole assembly plant or brick and mortar type of investment is no longer, everybody can provide that. Well, what you need to provide is the green incentives. A lot of the investors have their own ESG policy, their climate targets. So you need to look at a zone. How do I green a zone? How do I create green corridor? How do I create green infrastructure supporting that zone? And this is really the next challenge: how to differentiate the attraction of those investors you want to have in your zones. And then other elements that I will also subscribe with what Rami said is you need to increase the private sector participation in the management of this zone. Maybe 20 years ago, the policy-driven investment attraction was the most prevalent solution. Right now, you need professional management. You need the one-stop shop. You need to be able to say, I am the managing the zone, but I'm going to be able to get you the connection to the markets. I'm going to get you the connection to the certification. I'm going to get you the connection to the transports. So really, the old way of thinking is no longer applicable. You have to really go to look at how do I professionalize the zone to be able to foster that connectivity that really is the motto for success going forward.
You mentioned it about corridors, middle corridors, and second corridors. Central Asian countries we don't want to live in corridors. We prefer living in a living room where investors and businessmen will develop their business in Central Asia. So, Mr. Pinali, I have follow-up questions. In emerging economies, especially in Central Asia, what is the biggest challenge today? So, infrastructure, regulation, or institutional capacity?
Yeah, but I think you answer your own question, right? I think all of them, all of the above. But in general, I think the infrastructure, we always say supporting infrastructure is important. Yeah, but I think we have to stop talking about infrastructure. We need to start talking about quality infrastructure, because I think we have the enclave zones that might be definitely fitting the policy and the purpose, but they might not have the quality infrastructure that you expected, because we still struggle with reliability of the infrastructure. We still have this thinking that I think Uzbekistan has changed. A lot of countries have changed recently, but where you build and it will work. What I think we need to start thinking more is this private sector participation in infrastructure. Why? Because MDBs like us, we're very good at financing infrastructure, but really the challenge is how do we maintain the infrastructure at the same level of quality that you had it when you first constructed it. So introducing the element of O&M in all the infrastructure that supports the zones are very important. And that's where when I start looking at this concept of professional management, whoever runs the zone will have to also be able to introduce that private sector participation in guaranteeing the long-term durability of the infrastructure. So definitely the infrastructure, but that goes with the capacity building that you mentioned before, and in general, it also goes with the connectivity and the governance element that I outlined before. It's really my conviction is no matter how attractive is your investment, if you don't have the supporting elements of connectivity, management, infrastructure, you can offer the moon. The investor will not come because everybody is offering the moon these days. You need to offer a differentiator, as I said at the beginning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pinali. That highlights importance for factors beyond the boundaries of special economic zones. So let us now move to the perspective of international investors. Ms. Lisa Keisner, International Financial Corporation Division, Director for Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Turkey. So, Ms. Lisa, I have a question. What makes an special economic zones attractive and investable for IFC and institutional investors?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to the organizers for the event. It's unlike Enrico, it's my first forum that I have the pleasure of attending, and I've had a rather long pause in my interaction with Uzbekistan. I had worked on Uzbekistan through about 2017, and have then been working in other countries and have returned recently, and I find all the change and the dynamism of this economy really exciting, and this forum is a good symbol of that. In terms of IFC and our work with zones, I mean, first let me, for those who don't know, the International Finance Corporation, it's part of the World Bank Group. It's the IFI that is focused specifically on the private sector, and we're the largest investor in the private sector globally. Uzbekistan is a really important market for us. We have a portfolio currently of about $1 billion US, both in the financial sector and the real sector, with particular focus on renewable energy, on MSMEs, retail and manufacturing, and also housing finance. But we also have an active advisory program to support different topics, which include PPPs, access to finance, gender inclusion, green buildings, but also improving the business environment. And this work on special economic zones is particularly relates to improving the business environment and encouraging foreign investment. So in terms of what is IFC's experience and what are we looking at in Uzbekistan, so I think I would repeat a bit what Enrico and Rami have already said, which is that zones by themselves are not sufficient. You need a business case. So you need some sectors that are already attractive, an economy that has some competitive advantages and market opportunities. So it's not enough just to build the infrastructure. And then as Enrico was saying, the most effective zones are not just isolated islands by themselves. They need to be connected to the rest of the economy and beyond the national economy. So their success can be measured by their ability to attract investment, to create jobs, to support local enterprises, including with linkages to those outside the zone, by integrating into some of the national and regional value chains, and to contribute to economic diversification and private sector development. So you're not looking just to attract investors to the zone, but you're looking to benefit the economy of Uzbekistan.
Thank you, Ms. Lisa. So also I have one more question. When investors evaluate in special economic zones, what matters more, tax incentives or strong governance and regulatory stability?
So the use of incentives, as I think has already been mentioned, is one tool, but it's neither the most sustainable tool nor the most impactful tool. In fact, yesterday I was looking at a report that the World Bank has recently put out on industrial policy in Europe and Central Asia, and they looked at several different types of policy tools, and one was around incentives and subsidies, the other more around creating the enabling environment. And they found that the use specifically of subsidies, while it might create a quick bump in investment and economic growth, it doesn't really lead to added productivity or competitiveness. It's not sustainable. It's not really benefiting the economy. What's really benefiting the economy is lasting access to infrastructure, but also a strong investment climate. So in our work looking at zones globally, and the way we're thinking about Uzbekistan is looking at five factors. So the first would be, as you mentioned, predictable policies and regulations. The second is similar. It's around those policies and regulations, the procedures should be simple and transparent. The institutional rules should be clear, with transparent decision-making and also effective dispute mechanisms, because disputes do happen. The fourth is more the physical infrastructure, which is access to quality transport, water, energy, and telecommunications. And fifth, and very importantly, is a qualified workforce that the tenants of the zones can employ.
Thank you, Ms. Kestner, IFC Division, Director of Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Turkey. Thank you very much for your comments. Show how governments is becoming a key factor in investment decision. So let's now focus on performance and long-term economic impact. So next speaker is Murat Gursoy, Managing Partner, McKinsey & Company. So my question is, how can special economic zones be designed to create strong connections with the local economy instead of operating as isolated export zones?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And let me first start by expressing my appreciation for being in Uzbekistan again. And this is a great question, but the speakers before me, I think all of them have touched upon some aspect of this question. So my answer might sound like a synthesis of what you have heard. Therefore, I would like to start with maybe a different angle to this question, which is coming from 30 years ago. 30 years ago, my first formal job was with the Turkish Free Zones Authority. Like shortly after started working there, I heard the term special economic zone. And at first, now for this crowd, for these speakers, it might sound very obvious, but for a very young, by then, a junior associate at a ministry, I found it intriguing, like special. So what is so special about these zones? Over time, I came to understand, at least my interpretation is, when answering these questions like enclaves, export orientation, ecosystems, I think whoever coined the term special economic zone was a genius, because I think the underlying theme that he or she was trying to underline is, these zones they need to be special. Okay, they need to be solving for something that you cannot solve otherwise. It might be your tax system. It might be how your industry is attractive for FDI. It might be about your trade facilitation, know-how in the country. It might be different things you are solving for. And then if your base economy cannot, with the existing policies, cannot create a solution for your policy objectives, then you need to create something special. And that special thing needs to be in a predefined area, because you kind of want to keep them under control. You don't want to make the entire country feel that special. And when you approach, I think, the question about whether free zones, is it good for them to be enclaves or integrated into economy? I think you need to go back and see what you are solving for. I think the answer that, like most of us would expect from me for this question is, yes, they should be integrated. I think 80% of the time yes, your policy design should enable strong linkages with the base economy. However, if you are at the beginning of your industrial journey, and if you just want to get known by the international investors, businesses, and then you want to create your skill base, local skill base, maybe a zone that only facilitates international trade with no linkage other than know-how exchange with the base economy could work for you. However, like if you have an industrial base to build on, and if you are solving for maybe backward linkages in the supply chain or forward linkages, or maybe more higher value added production, then I mean the type of zone that you will develop will be different, and then it needs to be connected to the base economy. And again, based on your policy objective and the problem that you are trying to solve for, the incentives, subsidies, infrastructure, I think you need to think about all these together in connection to the problem that you are trying to solve for, and then make your zones special. Here is a provocation. In a country like Uzbekistan, do you really need 47 special zones? Is it too much? Do you think that they can be less special if there are 47 of them? So I think these type of questions would lead to the type of answers that would help you progress your industrial policy objectives. I'm sorry for a convoluted answer, but
based on global experience, which special economic zones policies actually drive exports, investment, and job creation, and which tend to produce only short-term results? Mr. Murat Karsuy.
yeah, I think Lisa already provided an answer for the interventions or mechanisms that create short-term boost but prove ineffective in the long term, which are around maybe incentives, subsidies, and there are ample evidence from scholarly articles, World Bank, IMF, all these research that like incentives and tax, fiscal incentives or subsidies, other forms of subsidies can give you a short-term boost, but in the long term, the real long-term performance depends on, like Rami mentioned, ecosystem effectiveness, like Enrico mentioned, the infrastructure, the quality of the infrastructure. In my view, I mean, as I said, I started working, my professional career started at Free Zones as a civil servant, basically. Then I moved to consulting world. Now, what I realize with performance and these type of incentives is there is a point where those incentives can really move the needle for the government, investors, and I think the society. And if you can find that sweet spot with the subsidies and incentives, then your interventions make sense. Then incentives, fiscal incentives especially, go beyond being hygiene factors. And this is no secret, so I can share it with you. At McKinsey, the way we think about this is when a government provides an incentive, it might be fiscal, it might be other subsidies. Does it make an unattractive investment attractive? And does it make it financially sustainable? And after what period? If you can solve that equation, I think you would also solve for optimizing government revenues versus private sector revenues and creating win-win situation between investors, society, and the government. But I mean, yeah, I mean, incentives are temporary and should be designed purposefully, as I mentioned. Other than that, as Rami and Enrico mentioned, high-quality purposeful infrastructure and ecosystem connections are determinants of long-term performance.
Mr. Murat Gursoy, Managing Partner, McKinsey & Company. Thank you. This brings us natural to the topic of governance, transparency, and investor confidence. And Mr. Vitaly Yakovlev, Managing Partner, KPMG. As competition between special economic zones increases globally, governance standards are becoming more important than ever. My question, what governance and compliance standards are essential for building investor trust in special economic zones?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Yerbol, and thank you to the audience, and pleasure to be here. Actually, it's very hard to not repeat what other people said already, because everything what was said very much resonates with our thinking of the process. I maybe will bring some regional perspective here, as I'm head of infrastructure for Caucasus and Central Asia at KPMG, and as part of that we analyze how special economic zones work in the region, and especially in Central Asia and in Kazakhstan. And if we speak about governance, what really is needed is the decision-making power. Yeah. So when we speak about one window or one-stop shop, it should not be the window through which the requests are taken, but it should be the window at which the decisions are made. Yeah. So we really speak about the delegation of authority. And in our region, it's not easy, yeah, because we have so many authorities, so many ministries, so many governments, each responsible for various aspects of performance of special economic zone and investment. And therefore, how it works is that some special law on authority of the operating company is needed. The next topic is about the rules of the game, which need to be stable and need to be predictable. This is the feedback we hear from investors, and which makes them decide to invest or not to invest. Yeah. So coming back to the topic raised previously by my colleagues, the economics should be there. Yeah. When we analyze various investments projects, it's very rare that absence or not or existence of tax reliefs makes the project bankable or not bankable. So basic economics should be there, and then there should be, basically reduction in the risk premium which investors require. How can it be? It can be through the regulation and through predictability of the rules of the game. Through transparency of procedures, such as, for example, selection process for the partners. Yeah. So actually the recipe of the special economic zones in the region has been the same for more than a decade probably. It's tax reliefs, provision of land, and provision of infrastructure. But if we look, for example, at performance of special economic zones in Kazakhstan, it's not that great as expected. So we have 16 special economic zones. More than almost 9 trillion of tenge invested in these zones, but less than 1% of export is related to the production from the zones. And if we look at the share in foreign direct investments, it's less than 3%. So it's not sufficient. Why is that? Because, as I said, we need a basic economics. Yeah, we need cheap and competitive labor. We need access and proximity to demand, and we need availability of supporting infrastructure, be it basic infrastructure, availability of suppliers, raw materials, etc., which is not the case in special economic zones. Again, there may be too many. I can relate to Murat here. There is no planning what should be strategically. Which drives the question, is it the right instrument? Is it the right instrument for the region? And we were working with the government and administration of president of Kazakhstan another topic which basically hinders the development of special economic zones is actually the governance itself, which is what we opened, because management companies of special economic zones, they are under local regulatory bodies under ICAMETs, and basically this drives the fluidness of the policy, and so rules of the game can change, acceptance can be delayed, etc., which is not making it attractive. So we were thinking that maybe we need another dimension and another instrument for the region, and we consider development of free trade zones, because Kazakhstan, as the Central Asia itself, is clearly located between China and Europe, and benefits from a lot of transit passing through, and is one of the growth areas in the world. And the way to start with is really to speak with investors. Yeah, so we think that development of the zone cannot be made on a desktop basis, so not in cabinets, but we really need to speak to investor and find out what we want. Interestingly, none of the investors requested tax reliefs. Yeah, and we were speaking with major logistic operators like DP World, Costco, etc. We were speaking with e-commerce operators. They were asking for different things, which is their operation in the zone, and we think this is how the special economic zone can be created. So it may be the case that actually we need to develop various type of zones, various type of special economic zones. One which targets the local production to increase export capacity, but then, as I said, basic economics should be there. Availability of competitive labor, availability of raw materials, and proximity to demand markets. And maybe Uzbekistan is a right place for that in the industries which Deputy Minister mentioned in the beginning, where we see potential for development. For other countries such as Kazakhstan, there may be development of another kind of zones, of free trade zones, which with around-the-clock customs, ease of procedures, consistency of rules of the game can drive the international trade, the value-added services. And what's great about it is that these zones can work together, as can be seen by Tangier example, which was brought earlier. So which is a combination of special economic zone and special trade zone, and which created this automotive cluster, the largest in Africa, which also has potential to export to Europe. So if we think on a regional basis where the production center should lie and where the sort of export and free trade zone should lie, I think we can benefit a lot regionally. Thank you.
There are 47 type of economic zones. So Chinese use more than 15. So one more question, Mr. Yakovlev. How can special economic zones ensure transparency and accountability without creating excessive bureaucracy for investors?
Yeah, we think that one of the ways to achieve it would be to use the data-driven audit. So, for example, to integrate the warehouse management system with the customs. So it's not a document check, but a kind of real-time data analysis which government bodies can see. And it's in this kind of aquarium with transparent aquarium where you can see. But it's very much different from the current procedure for example, in Kazakhstan, where you need to declare all the good item by item. So if you have, T-shirts of various sizes, you need to declare I have this many shirts of type M, this many shirts of type L, and this creates bottlenecks for e-commerce operators, which are very keen to into the region actually, both from China and from other countries. To maybe sum up, I think what can make it successful is we need to really speak with investors, really to speak on the ground and give real authority to operator. Another probably factor which makes international zones successful is the KPIs which are linked to the performance of the operator. So quite often, of course, there are different models, but if we look at the successful free zones or special zones operators, they are commercial operators. Yeah, so they are keen to bring the investors in. They are keen to motivate the investors to come in, and this drives transparency. This drives investor demand. If this is at the right place with the right regulation and with right predictability in place. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yakovlev, for insightful and very informative information. Now let's move from policy discussion to practical experience on the ground. So next speaker is Mr. Osman Arikhan, Chief Executive Officer of Polaris Park. Mr. Arikhan, Polaris Park is one of the leading industrial and logistics park in the region. So question is, based on your experience, what are the most important lessons learned from developing and managing a successful industrial park or special economic zones?
Thank you. Thank you, Erbol. You put me in a hard spot because first it's difficult to speak after so many experienced fellow panelists because they put the regulatory frameworks such well that you leave very minor to me to repeat, but I will have to repeat some of the items. And it's difficult to be the last panelist in the midday because I know most of you are very eager for me to wrap up quickly so we can go off to the lunch. But I'm very happy to see a full room. So either you are very excited about the subject or you are half asleep, but still I'm going to try to make my point. I have a different vantage point than my fellow panelists in here. And this vantage point is not only that I'm coming from a company which developed and operates 6 industrial parks, but because I spent almost 20 years of my life promoting industrial development in Egypt. And Egypt has a big similarity to where Uzbekistan is staying today. Big population, great manufacturing and export potential, a government that is very eager to establish an industrialization and manufacturing agenda. And Egypt was in the same spot 10 or 20 years ago. And what Egypt did is they found the answer on giving way for private industry to expand in manufacturing, but also in developing industrial parks. Because as said in here, there are so many special economic zones in the world and all of them are competing with each other. So having a good SEZ is not an answer. It does not make you an industrial destination. Just like having the pyramids does not make Egypt a tourism destination. Eiffel does not make Paris a tourism destination. You need hotels, you need restaurants, you need people to work there, you need ports, airports for people to come to those locations. This is the same for industry, it's no different. You have to be an industrial destination. The government has to put the policy to attract people, to make people think to invest there, and after they are thinking of investing there, we zone operators or zone developers, we are going to be like the hotel operators. We are going to welcome them. We are going to give them the 5-star service. So I think the most important thing in here is to create an industrial destination. Once this industrial destination is created, and this goes in parallel with all regulatory suggestions that has been pronounced in this panel, and when the investor is interested in becoming an investor on this specific location, they are looking for 2 things. They are already interested in this country. They look, where can I invest so that I have the lowest cost but also the lowest risk. Lowest cost does not specifically mean the lowest electricity, lowest labor, lowest access to ports. It means an overall bundle, an overall picture that includes equality, inclusion, green economy all together. So once it is there, they are interested on going for a certain special economic zone. And as private industry, we have this idea to speak their language, because I think the main difference, and some of our panelists has mentioned, especially Rami and Murat, that there are different types of special economic zones. Some of them are completely governmental, some of them are completely private, and there is something in between. I think this something in between that is more leaning to private is the correct answer in countries that are like Uzbekistan, like Egypt, like Turkey. Why is that? Because the motive of government is always to occupy the industrial park, always to bring in investment, and their KPIs, if I may call them KPIs, are occupancy rates, employment numbers, export rates. But for private operators, it is slightly different. We are still responsible to that manufacturing that we have attracted there because we are operating the zone. And we are also responsible for our shareholders because we have to make those manufacturers happy so that we can have a repeat business and we can be expanding to other countries and other regions. So this is operation side is rather an after sales service part. So this after sales service part is including all of the problems that you are going to face during your operational phase. And you have a private operator that's an interface between you and between the government that is trying to lobby and address your questions, address your problems, and solve them on your behalf.
Follow-up questions. In your view, where is the biggest gap today between government expectations and the actual needs of investors?
The biggest difference is, let me put it like this. Rami also already mentioned that there were 5,400 zones, and it was an old study. I think it was like 6-7 years old study at least. So I assume there are like 7,000 zones, special economic zones in the world. Almost 60-70% of them are located in Asia. 2,000 of them are located in China. So the competition is very big globally. But the competition is also very big locally. You have 47 special economic zones in Uzbekistan, and all of them are trying to capture a limited number of manufacturers globally. And everybody is trying to do this. So it is not possible to have special economic zones scattered in every region. This is why only 10% of special economic zones are in reality occupied. The remaining 90% are, some of them there only as a name. Some of them are there trying to do something, but we know at least half of them, unfortunately, I don't want to be the pessimist in here, but are going to fail. So what needs to be done? Of course, tax incentives, tax holidays, these are very important, but everybody is offering this. So when everybody is offering this, it is not a differentiator anymore. So it is a prerequisite. You have to be providing these things. The issue is, once the manufacturer is inside, who is speaking to them? Who is really trying to solve their problems? Is it our goal to bring that manufacturer to come and invest in this special economic zone? Or is it our goal to make sure that manufacturer is promoting the country and the special economic zone to their suppliers, to people that they are doing business with? I think this is where the difference is coming from. I think the main difference, and this is the main difference in expectation, and I will leave it as a question to the audience to think maybe, is a special economic zone a physical product or is it a service? As a private operator, we are always considering this as a service. The physical product, infrastructure, land, buildings, these are all given everywhere in the world, and they are realistically same everywhere in the world. If the country is attractive, they work. If not, they don't work. So the main difference is the service point, and this service point starts from the design of the infrastructure to the days of operational maintenance and continuation. I think this is the main difference between what government expects and what manufacturers or private developers visualize on operating zones.
Thank you very much. So today we have one more speaker and then group photo. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, to conclude our discussion, I would like to invite Mr. Soichi Kobayashi, chairman of Japan Development Institute. Mr. Kobayashi has been closely studying the development of special economic zones in Uzbekistan and also in Central Asia, and brings extensive international experience in this field. Mr. Kobayashi, welcome.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak about the special economic zone. I've been working for almost 45 years. I was one of the pioneers to come up a special economic zone on Asia, China, India, Bangladesh, all the ASEAN countries. So we work at 31 countries, and 29 countries all successfully turned the country upside down. Very much progress, particularly Asia, China, India, Bangladesh. So we are very much practitioner, not just, I've been used to be the academics, but I think I decided to creating millions of jobs will be worthwhile for the developing countries. So I have been developing the special economic zone. Initially, I working with the World Bank, ADBs, and the JICAs, but the process is too slow to meet the demand for the private sector. So 1986, I decided to make a PPP scheme. The private developer can operators. They can do much better job than government itself. That we find out. So rest of the Asia in the past 35 years, all the ASEAN countries, they developed and operated by private sector. And India and partially, and also other countries. So this has been my experience. Just
Включите, пожалуйста, презентацию.
Regarding the Uzbekistan, I think previously already discussed. So far, I understand that 47 special economic zones, various kind, already been developed. Very rapidly developing, in a sense, the relatively successful, but still many difficulty you are facing, that I understand. So this is, of course, discussed. And the creation of job, according to the statistic, only about 70,000 job creation. This is very, very small in my point of view. We normally create more than 1 million jobs by a special economic zone. And some country will create 5-10 million employment by special economic zone. That's normally the result in other countries, particularly Asia. So still many has to be done. And also another question is that in this country, the labor sector is growing very fast because of young population. And for example, last year, maybe 700,000 new entry to the market. But the Uzbekistan government cannot provide enough job for young people, maybe in half. So half of people has to find a job abroad, Russia, Kazakhstan, China. So I think the way to develop and industries and creating employment, I see that is one of the best solutions I find in all over the world. So maybe this subject of the question is that what is SEZ? So this picture shows you what is SEZ. So in my definition, SEZ is basically clean, attractive pond. for the migrating birds. Okay, the investor is basically migrating birds. They can migrate anywhere in the world. Whoever creates very attractive, clean pond, they can attract the birds. And of course, many developing countries worked, almost 80 countries I worked. They find that the many developing countries, when that migrating bird comes, people run, chasing them. And sometimes maybe catch the birds, make evening barbecues. So no. So this is not this normally happens in the practice. So question is that, okay, see that basically creating very clean, attractive pond for the migrating birds. That's it. So many cases the hunters are around, so we prevent hunters. And also we have to provide clean waters and the food, food for them to survive. So the question is that how are we going to be able to make a very clean and attractive pond for the birds? So we have to listen to the birds, first of all. And I think the government has to play a very important role. But under PPP scheme, I think I understand that the president is eager to try to come up a PPP scheme. That's why we are working for the IFC. It's true. I think if we can able to attract private developer and operator, so far it's better in all the Asian countries. The question is that enough market for this type of PPP scheme. That's the question we have to ask. So I think we need to think about this maybe question later on. And also I think I find, we only a couple months, but I think I find that many that the regulation in the Uzbekistan, I think are not meeting the needs of the birds. So we need to be changed a little bit. And so we can also discuss the land issues, the many other things, but I think not much time. So policy shift, I think, probably necessary. So we'd like to make several recommendations under the IOC. Otherwise, the migrating birds cannot come to Uzbekistan. So next question is that what kind of the birds you want in this Uzbekistan? So the Uzbekistan is again landlocked. For transportation-wise, it's not advantageous here. That reason all days that the silk is a main commodity from the Central Asia and China go to the Europe. Why silk becoming so good commodity for the taking from here to the Europe? Because of the high values and low weight. So that all days, the silk is very much valued, and the people in Europe willing to pay very high price and low weight. That's the reason silk becoming a major commodity from Central Asia, China to the Europe. The question is that in the 21st century, what is the silk? So you got to ask in this part of the world, what you can produce and able to export and sell them. Automobiles, the appliances, you come up so far, this type of industry already. But you cannot export appliance, refrigerator to the Europe and the United States from here. I don't think it's not so easy. Then, of course, you have been doing for the cotton, textile, and garment. So you've been also doing it. This can be some part already exporting garment sectors. But you cannot expand so much to employ the millions of workers. Then question is that what is the 21st century silk? In my answer, working for the 31 countries, and we practice in Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, China, all of those countries go beyond garment, textile, agricultural product. What happened in the past 30 years? The electronics gadget, they're becoming major global demand. You look at all the smartphones, the computers, and now there's the AI. AI requires so much of this maybe very tiny product. So I think my answer, 21st century silk in this part of the world is low weight, high valued. In the high tech is the electronics component. So in Uzbekistan, you cannot really manufacture the high class that IC chip, you can't. But I think regarding that the small component, which requires hundreds, 10,000 of the workers, this may be possible. For example, that we introduced a mini bearing company in Cambodia 10 years ago. Initially, the mini bear president said, "Oh, it's not possible to produce this very high-tech, high-value product in Cambodia." But I asked the Prime Minister Hun Sen to guarantee anything he can do to help them. So decided try, and actually now that the factory employ 8,000 people, and they are now expanded to the second factories. No, this one. So anyway, this maybe story tell you that even the Cambodia, because I have done, because the Cambodia no jobs for young people after the Pol Pot, the war. So I decided to helping the Cambodian young people to creating jobs. So we personally involved at the introduction of a SED program, 1906, and we built 24 of them, and one of them, I was the managing director for 5 years, and invited this maybe new Silk Road type of the new product. So the mini bear manufacturing, very, very tiny component for the Apple computers. And we have very successfully built one factory, 20 hectares, employing 8,000 workers. The second factory maybe employ more than 10,000 workers. So this kind of thing can be possible. And I think the Central Asia, Uzbekistan, probably this is the only type of the product which are globally supplied. All the products to be exported by air freight, not the containers. So this type of things, I think you can challenge in these countries. And also they find that the SEZ pond must be certain size. If it's small 20, 50 hectares, 100 hectares less, you cannot be competitive because simply not commercially viable. So the global standards for the successful SEZ in all my 31 countries, at least 300 to 500 hectares. All the integrated the infrastructure, be good enough for the bird to survive. Otherwise, bird cannot come. So I think in my quick view that so now that we are now discussing possible site of the the new type of special economic zone, one in near Tashkent, and the second one in the Siberia. And so maybe within the coming 6 months, we're going to do the feasibility study and market study, and also the changing the policies to make that this new global standards SEZ work for the Uzbekistan. Yeah. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate this opportunity to speak. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So thank you also very much to all our distinguished speakers for a rich and insightful discussion. Today, if you, dear colleagues and participants, if you have questions, you can ask. So if you don't have, I should finalize our panel session. Today we heard perspective from international financial institutions, investors, advisory firms, and special economic zones operators. And one message stands out clearly. Special economic zones are no longer just instruments of economic policy. They are becoming strategic platforms for investment attraction, industrial development, and economic transformation. Thank you to our audience for your attention and participation. We wish you a productive continuation of the forum. Thank you very much. Thank you for all. And I invite you to a group photo.